Well, good morning, or well, good afternoon, actually. We're having a few technical difficulties, so you won't be able to see myself, but I'm Sally Woolford, Business Director from mwah, Adelaide. And I'm joined today by Claudia Cannone, who's a CareerSwitch coach. We're going to be talking about what employees will be needing and expecting when coming back to the workplace post-COVID. We're going to walk through today. I'll just do a quick intro, sorry. So that's who we are. This is what we're talking about, and you can see the beautiful Claudia, but you won't be able to see me. So as I talk, feel free to look at the photo of me. We're going to walk through today about how did we get here, a little bit of background and history about how did we get here, what happened to us these past couple of months, the mindset for what's next, some steps moving forward, and we're going to give you a few tips and tricks about what we see as really, really important and useful tools that you can practically take away and use, and then going forward, what that might look like. So, Claudia, welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to give yourself a bit of an intro about yourself, and we'll carry on?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me as well. So, look, with the coaching that I've been doing, I started coaching before it was pronounced a profession, which is really interesting. And look, through my career, you know, I've had many ups and downs like everybody else, not just through COVID, but obviously and before. So I've been made redundant. My role's been made redundant, and lots of other things. So I guess it's an interesting and good place to be, because I can relate to a lot of the situations that I'm hearing at the moment, Sally. But thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. So let's have a little look at how did we all get here. So we're starting to look at how we're going back and returning to work and what that's going to look like. There's been some of us that have been hibernated or stood down, so to speak, and that haven't been working, or we've been working less hours. We've had some that have shifted to working remotely entirely and are now established home office and working environments somewhere completely different to where they'd normally work. And for some, there's a bit of a nicer place where they're working, where there's a smaller commute. So my commute is now 5 steps to the spare room. Or for some, that their commute is to the lounge or to the kitchen table. So it's been a very, very different experience for many people. Some obviously have continued working in their workplaces, and their workplaces probably are higher risk than normal as well. So we've had a whole variety of those environments, people's industries and roles. And then if we add in that complexity of humans and individuality, and it is an absolutely varied experience right now.
Exactly, Sally. Look, you know, because we've seen such a variety of working scenarios. You've got those who are working remotely and have discovered time. I'm not one of those, but people have discovered time and learned a manner of all these wonderful new skills. And then you've got those that are working remotely but homeschooling, and we've heard a lot about that, and then, you know, and the difficulties around that, the challenges. Educators, so obviously they've had to transition their entire curriculum to virtual, and you know, a lot of them lost their Easter breaks where they might recoup and re-energize. And of course, we've got our health workers and our carers. So, you know, the increased risks due to the nature of their role, additional pressure, stress. Some of them have had to leave and live somewhere else so that they can keep their family safe. So, you know, in some ways, we've seen the facade of work and home being kind of ripped away from us without any choice. I mean, Sally and everybody, you know, I set up a little thing behind me. I'm like, okay, this is me, this is for you, you know, because you're in my space, which is quite beautiful. But they're things that we've had to think about and deal with, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think before coronavirus, or COVID-19 for its technical word, we had that divide between work and home. So we had a beautiful divide where we just go and do our work, and then we come back, and never the twain did mix. You know, but we've now actually taken that down, and we've started to see the inner workings of people's lives. We've seen most of their home, whether they liked it or not. We've met the dog, the cat, the gadgets, the trinkets, the mugs, the plants. You know, there's been occasions, and probably if my video was on, I'd have a cup behind me that I'd forgotten to take to the kitchen. But the conversation really now is, what are we going to be doing going back? What is this shift that we're starting to see to return back? And what ultimately is that normal going to be looking like? So, Claudia, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, if I think all of the first thing that comes into my mind, and I think about a lot, is it is about the mindset, but it's another change. And Sally, we've gone through so many changes in such a short amount of time. We've had to get used to something, right? All of a sudden, we're like, okay, what's the positives? Well, positive to all this is I don't have to commute. Yep, fantastic. But now we're thinking about going back in there, and the commute is very different to when we didn't want to do it before. Now it's, was it safe? Is it okay for me? So all these new thoughts, a genuine fear around being in public, not just your office, well, as well as your office spaces, and there's cafes and restaurants, and even in the lift, making sure that that's okay. So we're worried about desks being clean. Obviously, hot desking is not, going to happen. And even the communal kitchen. There was an article which said, we recommend you bring your own tea bags, coffee cups, everything, cutlery, the whole lot. And all of that adds to this pressure and the stress. And because we had some wonderful places we would go to, which were fine, and we just go along to, and now we have to think very differently about. Interestingly, another thing that people have talked a lot about lately that they find really tricky, or thinking about, is the greeting. They're saying, I was just at a friend's house and I was like, oh no, we're not going to hug. And they went, oh no, it's fine. I thought, that's going to happen at work, where do I hug you? Do I not? No, I don't. It's safe not to. We need to stay away. This is still very important. But there's going to be this awkwardness. And so all these thoughts, which, relate to something called moral fatigue, all these decisions, should I, shouldn't I, what do I do? It's all this sensory information that's becoming exhausting. So with steps moving forward, and I know that the potential for phase returns, obviously, mental health and support is really the key. Along with leadership, I think that if leadership can talk to some of these nuances and say, look, it's going to be weird. It's going to be strange. Here are some rules, regulations, what we've got to do. And I know it's going to be weird to do that. It's going to be awkward. But if we can keep doing that, we'll keep ourselves safer. There's a real rise to that. This new CEO, the Chief Empathy Officer going forward, Sally.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that, and we've talked about this offline before, Claudia and I, is that it's about reinforcing that level of expectation from every single employee is going to be different in this space, where there is no two people who are going to have the same pathway back to work. I think that's really, really evident. And the role of HR and the people and culture teams in this space is absolutely critical right now. It truly is, to really try to forge a really respectful, supportive pathway back for each person. So I kind of came up with 3 C's about this, and to really keep in the back of your mind, it's about being caring right now. People will see if you genuinely care about them and their well-being. And we as employees, we want to be cared for. We want to be cared in a genuine way. And we want to feel very important, and that our voice and our experience coming back into the workplace is really valued. Equally, we want to feel that value if we don't feel comfortable right now, and that acknowledgement that that's okay. Confident. So people feed off confidence of one another. So it's really, really important that if you're an employer, having those conversations with your employees, that you have a level of confidence about, here's the mechanisms we can put in place for you. But also that then translates to them feeling confident about coming back as well, and what those steps might look like. So some people, it might be a phased step coming back into work. Some people might only come back in for 1 day a week just to catch up and do things, and then return back to remote working. But that confidence, it extends from the trust that I think we've started to see build whilst working remotely. There's a higher level of trust in that engagement, and it's something that we can actually really use into this next transition step. The other C is control. So we were all really placed into remote working, and it was outside of our control. It wasn't something that we'd deliberately asked for. We've lost a lot of that control about our everyday lives, the work-life balance. We've seen everything just sort of whipped away with the disruption that coronavirus has had. And so there's an element that we can now start to give a little bit of control back to employees and to how we want to actually return to the workplace. And that level of control and that ability to help make some of those decisions is really, really important going forward. So there's some key things that as an employer, for example, you could be asking questions such as what will you miss? What have you loved and what's exciting you right now? And what is your what are you feeling right now? So we've talked about a lot of fearfulness, but there are some people that may feel excited about returning back, and they are literally sat there wringing their hands excitedly about getting back into the office. And that's really, really, really good. We don't mind that at all. That's really, really important. But what it shows is that every single person is going to have a very different experience, and we need to really manage those transitions back into the workplace at both an individual level and at a collective level. So we've got a few little tips and tricks that we think we'd love to share with you. And are they, well-known tips and tricks? Probably not. Here's the ones that Claudia and I think that are really good, really useful, and really heartening. So Claudia, talk to me about your brightness scale.
Sure, Sally. Look, in all transparency, as I was saying, I'm not different to anybody else. I had a couple of really tough weeks through the COVID period, and I really didn't know, and this was in the very beginning as well, and I was noticing my feelings and the paradox of them. So I was happy, sad, but at the same time weary, but excited, like all those feelings. And someone asked me, said, how are you feeling? And I said, look, out of 10, I'm about a 7, but had you talked to me this morning, was around a 2. And they said, oh, because I want to be transparent. I want to show vulnerability. I want to tell people that it's not easy for anybody. I said, in fact, and look, all due respect to everyone from Melbourne, I love Melbourne, but I said to her, I feel like I've been to Melbourne, like with the weather changing all the time. She said, yes, I get it. She said, you know what, I'm not bad right now, but I reckon yesterday and this morning I was in Antarctica. Forget Alaska where you might go on tour. It was Antarctica. And I said to her, so how did you go from Antarctica to well, let's call it the Caribbean? Where are you at? She said 9. I said, right, let's make that the Caribbean, 9, 10. And she said, oh, okay, well, yeah, what I did is. And so, Sally, one of the things that I found myself doing is starting to share what I just made this up. It's the brightness scale. I have a piece of paper and it's got the sun in one corner and it's got the the rain in one corner and the sun in another. And I have it on the fridge. I have it on the dining room table. And I think, so, and with anyone that I've worked with, I've said, look, where are you at? And what number are you? 10 being fantastic, 1 not being so cool. And what's the weather like there? And Sally, I did this with my daughter the other day, and she said, I'm a 7. I said, what will get you to a 9? And she said, well, and I said, what's the weather like? And she said, you know what, Mum, it's pretty sunny where I am right now at a 7, but there's a big cloud kind of looming. And I said, what's that? She said, they're my assessments. And I'm feeling, I said, how are you feeling about that? So all of a sudden, we're having a deeper conversation. And I wonder if this is something that's useful for leaders to do, to have a language around that, but colleagues, what's your brightness scale? Where have you been today? Where do you want to go? Yeah.
I think it's really great because for me, when I first heard about it, I thought that's actually a really good metaphor way to talk about it without having to work out what your scale is or your ranking on that scale. And and you can we can't travel in real life right now, but we can travel virtually and in our minds. I think that's a really good way to actually talk about it. One of the things as well with that is it's actually quite good to sort of self-coach yourself. Hang on, I'm in the Antarctica. I've got to do something to get out of Antarctica, because whilst it's nice to visit, I don't really want to be here all day. So it's actually one of those things that you can actually mindfully use to work through. Where do I want to be? Where do I want to travel right now? And what sort of temperature am I looking for? So it's really good for that. The other little tip and trick that we've got for you, and we will send it out afterwards, is a survey to employees. So it's a sort of self-reflection or reconnection reflection, we've called it. What are those what are those magical things that your employees are feeling and saying that they should be kept as they go back in? And one of those things that they really, really wish that they could have right now if they're coming back into the workplace. So we've created a wonderful little template that talks about what they're feeling. Do I feel happy, sad? Could use the brightness scale. You could say where you are and which country or which state you might be in. And then actually looks at if there was a corporate fairy, golden fairy mother that's going to give you that one wish. What does that one wish and what does it look like? And then also then look at the plan. So the plan for when you're coming back in is pre-entry. Have a little considerations. What are those things that you're looking for pre-entry? How do you reconnect and re-engage back in? Actually going back into the workplace, and that's where some of those commuting considerations will come in and some of that fearfulness. And then also when you're in the workplace and you've actually gone back into that workplace, going through that again, because they're three different transition periods of which there's going to be slightly different considerations, and you're probably going to have very different mindset and thoughts and feelings on. So one of the things I'd say is it's really about being honest as an employee as well. So honestly sharing how you're feeling and some of those fears. You know, for example, one of the things, the wish list, like when we were in coronavirus, we really didn't have any issues with children, dogs, and everyone interrupting our day to day. There's probably still going to be some of that level of interruption, and it's normal and real. And, you know, can that carry on forward? I think it should, because it shows us as real people. But it's also, when you're talking about this, is it's also about really capitalizing on those opportunities to change the way we work together as individuals. Claudia, what are your thoughts on going forward?
Yeah, look, absolutely, that they're the key things for me. And when we were talking, Sally, it was absolutely about, you know, the reason that I really got excited about, and I use the fairy godmother thing all the time. The reason for that is I'm going to show my age now, but many, many years ago, before working from home was a thing, before it was almost career suicide to even think about it. You wouldn't have thought about it. I actually sat down and said, what kind of role would I have? What would I want? And I had to imagine I'd have a fairy godmother in front of me, because we're so structured in the way we're thinking that we think this is allowed, this isn't allowed, right? And so I thought, well, what if everything was allowed? What if I could just literally have someone make it magic? I remember writing a list, Sally, of all those things. I'd love to work from home. That's crazy. My husband said to me, what? That's never going to happen. This is a long time ago. And I'd love to go to sporting events if I ever have children. And he said, oh, that's career suicide. And we had this interesting conversation, but, you know, people thought about it, asked, and now it's the norm. So there are some things that are the norm, and this is, or we've really loved. And Sally, you made such a great point before when you said, you know, the restrictions are lifted and some of them, and people are feeling great. I've got to be honest, part of me went, oh, I feel fantastic. Things are getting safer. I'm really excited about that. And part of me went, oh, and I thought, what? Why am I feeling like that? I had feelings about my feelings. How can I not be 100% happy? So if you start to make a list of those things of what is it for me, which is what you were saying, some of the things that we think are normal today, which weren't normal many years ago, might actually be things that are normal going forward, which is why we're strongly encouraging you to do that, right? So for me, it's absolutely the other, not so much a tip, but a consideration. I talked about the chief, you know, empathy officer. Leaders are out there, I believe, doing the best they can, and they can only do the best they can if we share with them, but they need to share with us. So I guess that co-creation of empathy, of going, okay, this is our situation. How can we make it the best we can? How can we get really creative about making it cool going forward? And I had an example for just to finish that off. Of a wonderful woman who said to me, you know what, Claudia, what I'm going to miss, I'm an EA, and I've worked with my manager, if you like, for 5 years, and our amazing meetings we're having every Monday for 90 minutes are different. I've got an insight into his home. He's being really open. I've really got to know him. I'm loving it, and I'm going to miss that. And I said, well, why wouldn't you bring that forward? And she said, oh, I don't think it will. I think with the hustle and bustle will go. And I said, well, okay, that's a human thing. That's a human, beautiful question to say, hey, guess what I've really loved? This is what I gained from it. How can we make that going forward? He may be surprised, but it's certainly the thing. So, yeah, all the things that you've talked about, and maybe there's some examples of making them real for you.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Rhonda and Nikki talked about in one of the previous CareerSwitch webinars was that it's really important as the employer to really reconnect to each of the people and personally, and see how they're traveling and kick-starting that conversation. So what is it they're finding easy at the moment and what's going to make it harder. So really having those conversations. We've had a really, really good opportunity to just completely change the way that we're working. So we like to prefer it as an opportunity rather than a pandemic disruption. And there's always, I think that you've got to go forward with these things with a really optimistic mindset about what are those opportunities that we can now use and leverage off going forward, whilst being cognizant of the fears that people have about that. So we've given you a couple of little tips and tricks. They're very small little tips and tricks, but we think that they're really useful. So we'll probably hand over to those that are watching to give us some questions. If you've never asked a question on GoToWebinar before, there's a little section that you can pop your questions in, and we will endeavour to answer as many as we can for you. So I've got one from Dalip Chatwal from India. Do you think that after COVID-19 there should be survivor of the fittest? Oh, that's funny. I like that because I keep talking about Darwinism and how some of this is an experiment of it. I guess it depends what the definition of fittest might be. I think there's a level of unfitness that we've all had about thinking about a long-term disruption to our businesses. So probably the survivors of this entire thing will be those that actually can manage change, handle change with that level of resilience, being able to bounce back afterwards, and also being able to manage change. And that's not just a physical change per se, but it's also about mental changes and how sort of prepared you are and how you've thought those through. So will there be survivor of the fittest? Possibly. I think we will see out at the end who thrived and who just tried to survive through this. I think we've all had thriving days and we've all had survivor days and we've all had days where we think we've got this and we've nailed it. So we shall see. Any more questions on there? Let's have a little look. One of the things actually that's come up, Claudia, from your experience as a coach, what sort of 3 things do you think that would really help people get into that mindset coming back?
So I think, and look, the mindset is very much about being honest with yourself, and just to the question of survival and fittest. When you're really honest with yourself about, okay, this is what I can do. And if you're someone that doesn't love change, that's okay. Think about all the times that you've had change and that you got through it, right? What has helped you pass? What have you done there? What are your strengths? What are the ways you think about it? We've all been through change in our lives and you got through, and realizing that it's a transition. So if you think about the change we had, 9 weeks ago roughly, all of a sudden you had to get used to it, but you got used to it and you looked at and you started getting really cool and good about looking at what the positives are and going, okay, how can I manage this? So you've done the work. What it means now is how can you use that and look forward and say, okay, it's another change. And look, I'm speaking from personal experience. I don't love change. I realize that even when I implement the change, I'm still going, do I really want this? So I go, it's just a transition. What are my strengths? What am I good at? How have I done it before? And once I get used to it, I'll be fine. What can I do to help myself get used to it? And I can tell you one cool thing to do is to have a ritual. So 2 or 3 things that you do, regardless of whether you're working at home, working from home, 2 or 3 things. Maybe it's when you get out of bed in the morning, it's what strength will I use today, or doing the same thing. It might be the same kind of cup of coffee in the same cup. Our mind likes some stability, and if you've got that, it actually gets easier going forward. So I think, and just in terms of the fittest thing, I think if you're someone that loves change, if you want to be really good in your business and you want to be fantastic as a leader, your thing will be, how do I not help people get along and bring them, but how do I use my emotional intelligence in understanding that? Because I think the success on the fittest will be those that get together with all people and work with it going forward together rather than leaving people behind. It might take more processing time, Sally.
Oh, it would do, but that's okay. Next question. I want to keep working from home in the future, but my boss is adamant that we're all returning to the office. Any guidance as to how to manage that conversation? Oh, lovely. Claudia, do you want to answer first? Or shall
Oh no, go for it. I've got a lot to say about it too, but please.
I? From my perspective, um, it's about having that conversation with your boss. There's obviously a reason why they really want you all into the office, and it's really important to have that conversation about what are the key things that they're looking for. Some of those things might actually be that you can carry on working remotely or working from home. And some of those aspects of the role might mean that you actually do have to physically return back to that office. I think it's about really having clarity about what you are looking for, understanding what your boss is looking for, and then actually having a conversation, and a respectful conversation. There's going to be many people that have actually had a taster of this different working life, and there's going to be many that actually say, I no longer want to come back. We've heard a few different clients that have said, I've got some cohorts of employees that definitely don't want to go back. The reality is that we do have some contracts that tell us that, you know, our place of work is here, but it's about having a negotiated outcome and a conversation about what that might look like. Claudia, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's a business case, right? And it's, I don't know that it's that different to when we were asking to work from home before. You go to your employer and say, okay, here's what I think, here's what you get out of it if I get to work from home. This is what it looks like. What's the business needs, right? Because you're working for a business. So what does the business need? And is there scope there? Is there a gap there where, okay, what if, you know, we all got together and came in? Like, there's teams at the moment before COVID who'd say on Wednesday afternoon, that kind of works for everybody. Everybody's in the office and we all do this. So it's I guess it's that absolute. I think you should say, look, you know, and this is me again. I'd say, oh look, if I had a fairy godmother, I wouldn't come in anymore. But you know, you actually want to have a think about that, because would you miss it, right? I just, in terms of any question you've got, and this is why it's really important to check in with yourself. Is it because we talked before about losing control and all of a sudden saying, now you're going to go back? You go, hang on a minute. So what do you really want, right? And if you could have what you really want, is it to work from home 5 days all the time? Is it a blend? Is it this? Is it that? Have a really good think about that. As well, I'd say, because I think that then just say they said, yeah, sure, how long would you actually stay there all the time? Would you not want to go in sometimes? And have a think about the why. Why would you want to go in? What is that? What have you missed? Just some thoughts.
Absolutely. Next question we've got is, what responsibility do you have for people who are genuinely anxious or feel more at risk? Well, we have an overall work health and safety responsibility. But equally, it's really, really important. This is about people in a business. People in your business are the thing that makes it work. So you do have a role to play in understanding what their anxiousness is about. There are many people that will have elderly or at-risk people in their house, and probably we're only just realizing that now because they may not have shared it previously with others in the workplace and just carried on that home life as well. So I feel that there is an overall responsibility for people. Equally, though, they also have a responsibility for working with you to work out what that transition back into the workplace might look like. Are they at the end of the queue for coming back in? What can that look like to reduce the risk to them as well? So it's about having a plan. And for somebody that's genuinely more at risk, it's really taking all those things into consideration. Now, I did see a company do a wonderful sort of user persona, and you usually see them when you're using a system, but they're using it to actually tap into that individual's sort of persona, what the things are that are happening to them, and then track through and try to create a plan that actually can help reduce that anxiousness. So similar to our reconnection reflection piece, but really going down to an individual level about their circumstances. So for example, somebody that has a child with cystic fibrosis, you know, that's a really high level of risk, and what that might look like for that person and their plan back into the workplace is going to look very different to somebody else. So yes, overall, I think we do have a great responsibility for people that are anxious or feel more at risk. Claudia, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think you've covered it perfectly. I think that's absolutely right. And it is going to be some work, but it's worthwhile work. Individual cases are absolutely important right now. So yeah, I think you've answered that beautifully, Sally. It is about that.
So our next question, coming along the anxiousness theme, if you feel anxious or nervous, how is it best to raise that in advance of returning? Now, I guess for me, this is about doing that self-reflection to try to find out what that nervous or anxiousness is coming from and what's it stemming from. And then really the best way to raise it is the earlier the better, and in a very honest way. Because I think most employers right now are really wanting to look after their people as best that they can. And one of those things is really about trying to reduce that level of anxiousness. So for example, if you're somebody that hot desks, you're probably going to have a high level of anxiety right now. If you're somebody that sits on a call center and you share a telephone set, you're going to start to be wondering, like, do I really want to actually do that? Sometimes when it's hot desking, you don't know the other user of that desk. So, you know, there's things outside of your control that you can manage in terms of, you know, potentially you're thinking you're going to get coronavirus and then you're going to take it back into your house. So it's really about having those honest conversations with your supervisor, but going in there with an open mindset, having reflected on what it is that's making you feel nervous. Your thoughts, Claudia?
Yeah, look, Sally, I'd say, you know, I'm thinking of the most, you know, let's call them mental fit, resilient, excited, let's go person that I know, and I know quite a few, and every single one of them has said, I've got some anxiety about going in, like, do I really want to do this, right? They're highly practical people. So their worry and their anxiety is coming from a very practical place. So the first thing I'd say is, power to anyone out there who isn't feeling any of it. I think that's remarkable. I don't think there's anyone that wouldn't. And especially if you've got extenuating circumstances, that's going to go another level, right? We've been told, it's like I heard this lady say the other day, I had to tell my kids, be careful, don't do this, wash your hands, and now I'm going to have to say to my kids, oh, it's okay. We still have to do all this stuff, but you can go out there again. That's a lot, right? So all that is going to cause some of that. I love what you said about saying it earlier. So first of all, I'd like to say, if everyone's honest with themselves, you're not feeling a little bit of it, and that's normal. It's normal. The second thing is I think you'd ask your employer, I'd say, so how are you feeling? Have you got any level of anxiety or worry around that? Like, what's it for you? And again, that real conversation. And I would love for everyone to be honest and not say, no, I'm fine, I'm great, I'm good. I mean, who wants to talk to that person? That's not what you want. So look, I'm okay, this is how I've gotten okay, this is what I thought. I did have some anxiety, but definitely not pretending is what you want to do, and say, this is it for me, I'm a practical person, this is why I have some worry, this is what my concern is, I'd love to think about how I can get around that, and what are some things. And that's where, if your company's got somewhere that you can talk to, I would 100% encourage everybody to be doing that right now. Thanks, Sally.
Absolutely. So the next question we've got is, I have a team of where 60% of people are desperate to return, but building management has said capacity in our office will only fit 40%. Any advice? Oh, this is where we're all going to be held hostage to the building management of every single place, isn't it? And I actually do know a couple of government buildings where they're entirely hot desking. So they're probably in a conundrum right now about how on earth they're going to dismantle hot desking that they established 5 years ago. And it's probably going to cost them some money. Any advice about it? I think this is where you really have to have that conversation about what are the aspects for. If 60% are desperate to return, are they desperate to return full time, or are they desperate to return on certain days? And it's about having a look at that mixture of whether it's like team meetings or something like that, or whether it's actually they desperately just want to get back to reconnect. If it's desperately just to reconnect with each other, then there's probably something that should have been carrying on while we were working remotely, because if they've lost that connection and they feel they can only get it face to face, then there's probably something that's quite amiss as well. Building management really are the ones that are going to become a little bit of our rule makers in some of this, with all the social distancing and that 4 square meters and things like that. We've got to do it. It comes to, for me, for this question, it comes to having a conversation. What is the balance? It also comes down to eventually, as the employer, which ones absolutely are key to being physically in that building. And there will be some that are absolutely key to that, but there will be others where it can be a mixture. So the other option, of course, is go and get an extra office, because there's probably going to be a fair few of people that actually no longer need the level of offices that they've had. So you might find that you actually get quite a good rental deal as well.
Well answered. Thanks, Sally. Totally agree with all of that. Absolutely. You know, and you know, look, let's have a think about it. We know nothing is forever, right? So 60%, let's say, you know, and they might change up. And I'd say with all of this, you know, if leadership is going out there and saying, so yes, building management saying this is what we've ascertained to, you know, help us be safe. But I think everybody, all of us need to be aware that nothing's set in concrete, and things are moving just like they moved really quickly in the beginning of COVID. That they're moving, you know, the same way going back. Well, not so much so quickly, but what I'm saying is there's lots of different changes. And so, okay, eventually, you know, of course, I'd love, you know, and that, of course, it's going to happen where everyone will be able to return, right? We want to see that. It's a bit of a waiting game. It's just for now. It's all okay. Let's see what the business needs, what makes more sense, and just have a level of patience and understanding and business acumen around that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, this is a good one, and I think this one's for you, Claudia. We've lost half our team to redundancy over the past month or so. Survivors now are feeling guilty and worried about how it's going to feel when we come back together. How do I hold our culture together?
Wow, you know what? That really did hit home. So thank you for whoever asked that. I will never forget. I was asked, I thought I was going to get retrenched twice in the space of 4 years in the company I was in. And both times you waited by your phone. And if you got the phone call, you got the phone call. But we were sitting there. So by the end of the day, half were gone, half were there. I was still there. And I'll never forget, I was very young. I was only in my mid-20s. And I felt sick in my stomach because I felt so much guilt. I got that. The really interesting thing, and this is not maybe the answer that you're looking for, but what I noticed, and look, the best thing I could do was keep in touch with some of these people, and I noticed they all went on to other things. Like, it's interesting how things opened up for them. I had to try to maintain a level of presence. I was still in a job. I still had to do the work. So that was the what I needed to do. What one leader did is which I thought was amazing. So I worked for different people, 3 at the time, and one of them took us aside and said, this is how you must be feeling. Who's feeling like that? And we had a wonderful conversation around that. She took us through a change model. She said, you know, if you want to talk to me, I don't blame you, blah, blah, blah. This is how it feels. And it was amazing. The other two just went, you'll be fine. You're lucky. You've got a job. Off you go. Overplaying perspective is what I call that today. So the couple of things in there is, if it's you that's going back, you know, give the respect to the role and do it as best you can. But I would be the person. I would be the change I want to see. And if no one's doing it, go in there and say to leaders, hey, can we have a discussion around that? This is real. We're feeling like this. Can we talk about that? And can we check in with each other? Because I think that's really important. You don't want to forget. So the fact that you've got that, I think you should be the person going in there and saying, right, well, how do we make sure that everybody that's staying feels as best as they can while we're here?
Absolutely perfect, and great to have your personal experience of that one. Thankfully, having worked in government, I didn't get made redundant, so hopefully I'll never need to experience that. But I think it also is so important about that culture and the culture moving forward, and to sort of round up some of that. It's really, really important that we don't lose that people aspect of the culture going back into the workplace. It's really important that it's a very honest and respectful culture as well. I think we've all experienced this differently. And so therefore that whole talking and connecting and reflecting on that experience and tapping into those positive elements moving forward is absolutely key, and those opportunities to really progress and keep that culture in a really positive way. So for me, our close and call to action. What is our close and call to action from your perspective today, Claudia?
Oh, look, I think it's a couple of key things. One is the self-coaching, right? How am I feeling? What do I need? What do I want? What if I could have anything I want, what would that look like? Just start from there and then obviously come down. I'd say, okay, what are my employers doing? And if they're not doing something that you want, then help them and say, hey, listen, you know what would be really helpful is this, which is that last piece we just talked about, be the change you want to see. And this is the time I think that, you know, everyone has a brand, right? We know that. This is a time where if you've got these feelings, if you've got these ideas, be that person who says, hey, not just me, and even if it is, that's okay, but there's all this going on, how can I help manage it? Because what we've seen is, what a lot of people have talked about through COVID is, all of a sudden, everyone really cared. Like, it was fantastic. This empathy was really high and compassion was really high. People were checking in and it was wonderful. We want to keep that going, and that happened because people were actually saying, how are you? This is tough. What can I do? How are things going? I just see that as an extension going forward. Like, don't go back into the workplace and go, right, let's go, we're back on, and lose that. That, I think, would be sacrilege. Like, it would just be awful and really, really sad to see. So yeah, think of what you love and bring it forward and be the person, be the change agent.
Excellent. Oh, we've got a last couple of questions, so I'll just quickly go back into those. Sorry. Do you think that companies will formally update their flexible policies post COVID-19? Absolutely. Biggest opportunity you have right now is to reinvigorate and completely reframe flexible working. Go forth, do it as quickly as you can while the momentum's there. And does the government have any role to play at all in the present situation? Yes, absolutely. They're absolutely in charge of what's going on at the moment. But it's actually our responsibility about how we manage that at an individual level. So it's been an absolute pleasure to hang with you all on the telephone and Claudia in person. Please, if you've got any questions that you'd like to follow up and send through to us afterwards, we've got our contact details are all on here. We'll also send out the recording and the self-reflection tool out to you all that registered to attend. Make a connection. Please go forward and actually look after yourselves and each other. I think what Claudia said about being the person to help manage it and be the change you want to see is absolutely, this is the absolute key time to do that now. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sally. Check in with yourselves, everybody. Brighten the scale. Thank you.